Now, these are devastating and truly horrific allegations.
Princess Anne never imagined she would have to confront people within her own family. But this time, things had gone too far. A series of lavish parties, mysterious guests, and shadowy money trails all led back to one name: Laura Lopes, daughter of Queen Camilla. What shocked Anne was the discovery of strange changes inside Balmoral Castle, leading her to suspect that the sacred royal symbol had been exploited for private purposes. When the first signs appeared, Anne began following every small detail. Unusual entry-exit schedules, unfamiliar staff, and especially the repeated presence of Laura Lopes nearby. But what was even more shocking was the quiet involvement of Camilla, creating a near-perfect and terrifying conspiracy. Caught between royal honor and family ties, Anne was forced to choose. If her suspicions were correct, the consequences would go far beyond a mere scandal. They could shake public trust in the monarchy itself. Is Anne facing a sophisticated plot, or is she stepping into a battle with no way back? Princess Anne stepped down from her familiar Range Rover. The chilly Highland air rushed in the moment the door opened. Balmoral Castle appeared before her as always: sturdy granite walls, ancient watchtowers, and meticulously trimmed gardens. But today she had arrived earlier than usual to prepare for an official royal reception, an event she always valued because it represented the continuity of tradition. Anne walked straight into the Grand Hall, where everything should have been arranged according to centuries-old protocol. The instant her foot touched the marble floor, she froze. The familiar atmosphere was gone. The long oak tables that Queen Elizabeth II had used for decades were missing. In their place stood modern minimalist furniture with glossy Scandinavian lines and pale gray leather armchairs. Cold white LED lights had replaced the warm golden glow of the massive crystal chandeliers. The arrangement was different too. No longer the strict hierarchical order. No longer flowers arranged in royal colors. Instead, simple modern vases that looked more suited to a high-finance cocktail party in London than a royal banquet. A cold shiver ran down Anne's spine, not from the weather, but from the stark transformation. She had always been extremely sensitive to the smallest details of protocol. She walked slowly along the hall, observing every corner. The ancestral portraits still hung in their original places, but the new table layout made the space feel alien, as though the room was now being used for an entirely different purpose. She stopped at a side table and noticed traces of high-end wine bottles not on any royal list, the kind only the ultra-wealthy drank. Her heart beat faster. This was no longer her Balmoral. She immediately called over the nearest servant, a middle-aged man named John, who had served there for over 20 years. Anne's voice was calm but razor-sharp. "John, who authorized these changes? This is not our royal style." John bowed, his face clearly anxious. "Your Royal Highness, I received orders from higher up. We only followed instructions. The recent parties, they said they were official events. We simply carried out the orders, ma'am." Anne frowned more deeply. "Official events? Why was I not informed? And why are all the familiar staff absent?" John hesitated. "They were given leave on those occasions. New staff came in to serve. We assumed everything was legitimate, so no one questioned it." Anne remained silent for a moment, suppressing the rising anger. She called 2 more servants, and the story was nearly identical. The castle had been regularly used for parties, but regular staff were always given leave and replaced by younger, quieter teams. They believed these were official events, so no one suspected or reported anything unusual. Anne felt a deep unease. Balmoral was not just a holiday residence, it was a symbol of royal heritage, the place her mother had guarded down to the smallest detail to protect the family's honor. If tradition was being violated here, what larger threat was the monarchy facing? She said nothing more to the servants. Anne turned and walked down the long corridor, clutching her small handbag tightly. In her mind, the first clear suspicion took shape. Something was happening behind the legitimate facade. She was not one to panic easily, but this time the weight of duty pressed heavily on her shoulders. She immediately called her private assistant on a secure line. Checked the entire Balmoral usage registration system for the past 6 months. I want everything immediately. Her voice was calm, but anyone who knew her recognized the iron determination. Anne understood. If she did not act quickly, this breach could widen and threaten the credibility of the entire royal family. And so her investigation officially began. She wasted not a single second. That same evening, in her private room at Balmoral, under the dim glow of a desk lamp, she sat before a secure laptop connected directly to the royal family's internal system. Her private assistant, a middle-aged man named Michael, had been urgently summoned from London. Anne got straight to the point. "Michael, I need the complete usage history of Balmoral for the past 8 months. Every detail, no line overlooked." Michael nodded, his voice slightly trembling as he sensed the gravity in her eyes. "I'll handle it immediately, Your Royal Highness. You'll have the full report by morning." The next morning, as the sun rose over the Scottish hills, Michael arrived with a thick stack of documents. Anne turned page after page, her sharp eyes scanning every line. All the events were registered legitimately under Queen Camilla's name. The paperwork was impeccably clean. Dates, times, purpose listed as private royal family event. Clear electronic signatures, no administrative errors. But Anne was not deceived by the tidy appearance. She immediately noticed the anomaly. The frequency of usage had skyrocketed to an unreasonable degree. In 8 months, Balmoral had been booked 14 times, more than 3 times the average of previous years. None of these periods coincided with any public royal events. No anniversaries, no diplomatic receptions, no official visits. A quiet fury began to rise in Anne, not from being deceived, but from the clear disrespect toward tradition. She asked Michael to pull additional access data, records from keycard systems, and perimeter security cameras. When the data appeared on screen, she could hardly believe her eyes. Many entry-exit times were either incompletely logged or listed only as vague royal guest. There were hours-long, even overnight gaps with no explanation. "This is no longer the royal family," Anne muttered, her voice low with suppressed rage. "This is a power game, exploiting the system to hide something." She stood up, pacing the room, fingers gripping the edge of the desk. Anne was not prone to baseless suspicion. She had lived through many royal crises, from public scandals to internal rifts, but never had she seen anyone dare exploit an iconic property like Balmoral so brazenly. Camilla had the highest access level, which was undeniable. But why use it this way? Why the strange gaps, the repeated bookings without detailed guest lists or true purpose? Anne turned to Michael, voice resolute. "I want to know who approved these registrations. And why was there no cross-check from the estate management team?" Michael hesitated. "Under the new procedure, some cases are approved directly at the highest level, meaning from Queen Camilla." Anne was silent for a long moment. She clearly saw legality on paper, but a complete lack of real transparency. This was not a system error, this was deliberate. Someone had exploited authority to create loopholes, and Camilla stood at the center. She said nothing more to Michael. Anne only nodded, signaling him to leave. Alone in the room, she gazed out the window at the tall pines swaying in the wind. Deep worry mixed with heavy responsibility. If this continued, not only Balmoral, but the entire reputation of the monarchy would be at risk. Anne knew she could not stop now. She needed deeper evidence. She picked up the phone and called an old friend in the royal security team. "I need access to Balmoral's perimeter cameras, all footage from the past 6 months. No one is to know." Her voice was calm, but anyone listening felt the iron pressure. Anne sat down and began planning. She would follow every trace, every document, every frame of video. The truth, however unpleasant, must be brought to light. For the honor of the royal family, for the legacy her mother had spent her life protecting. And this time, Anne would show no mercy. While Princess Anne quietly gathered evidence at Balmoral, the truth behind the secret parties had begun months earlier in private conversations between two women, Queen Camilla and her daughter, Laura Lopes. Camilla had never publicly admitted it, but maternal love had always been her strongest driving force. Laura, with her new art gallery project called Lopes Gallery in London, stood on the threshold of major success. She needed huge investment capital from people who were not easily convinced to back a rising gallery. One quiet evening at Clarence House, Laura had confided in her mother. "Mom, they need to see real backing. Just one event in a prestigious place, and they'll pour money in." Camilla was silent for a long time, then sighed. "Darling, I understand, but we must be careful. I'll help, but it must not become public." Camilla began to act. With her highest-level access to the royal estate management system, she registered Balmoral for private events under her official name. Each booking carried vague notes: entertaining royal partners or internal family meeting. She quietly influenced a long-time loyal system manager, asking him not to scrutinize these bookings deeply and to limit detailed record-keeping. "Just make sure the paperwork is legitimate," Camilla said in a private call, her voice calm yet tinged with unease. The manager nodded, not daring to ask more. Laura made full use of the opportunity. She organized the most luxurious parties. Top French wines, Michelin star chefs, and live music from famous artists. The guests were financial investors, venture capital funds, and high-end art collectors. At each event, Laura skillfully steered the conversation. "This is where the royal family often holds important gatherings. My mother, the Queen, has always believed in my artistic vision." She never lied outright, but the way she emphasized her royal connection left a powerful impression. Guests looked around the Balmoral Grand Hall, a place that had hosted heads of state, and felt that Laura's project was not just a gallery, but part of royal heritage. Though Camilla never attended in person, she always received reports from Laura after each party. She listened to her daughter talk about new contracts signed, promises of investment, and smiled with satisfaction. Yet deep down, she could not escape worry. "Darling, don't let this go too far," she once cautioned during a private meeting. Laura brushed it off. "Don't worry, Mom, no one will know. Everything is legitimate on paper." Camilla nodded, but inside a vague anxiety began to grow. She knew she was taking a risk not only to her personal reputation, but to the credibility of the monarchy. The parties continued, each bringing larger flows of capital. She did not realize that, hundreds of miles away, Princess Anne was following every trace. The legitimate bookings under Camilla's name, the gaps in access data, all were gradually coming to light. Camilla and Laura believed they had everything under control, but in reality, their thin cover was about to be torn apart. And as Anne dug deeper, the mother and daughter remained unaware that the storm was approaching. At the same time, Princess Anne no longer stopped at numbers and documents. She knew the real truth lay in the details the system could not completely hide. With iron determination, she instructed Assistant Michael to expand the investigation. Extract all perimeter security camera footage from Balmoral over the past 6 months. Michael worked through the night, and the next morning, as Anne sat in a secure office, the screen filled with footage. She scanned clip after clip, eyes never leaving the monitor. Then the first discovery made her draw a sharp breath. Laura Lopes' glossy black Mercedes clearly appeared at Balmoral's side gate on exactly the days the private parties took place. Not once, but 9 times in 8 months. Laura usually arrived in the afternoon, the car stopping about 30 minutes before guests began arriving, and leaving as late as the next morning. Anne slowed one segment. Laura stepped out, elegant long dress, phone in hand, glancing around as if checking everything. Rage surged through Anne, not jealousy, but fury at the blatant exploitation of the royal name. She dug deeper. Checking internal camera logs, she found a serious anomaly. All cameras in the Grand Hall, main corridors, and reception rooms were switched off during the exact hours of the parties, with identical system notes. Privacy protection per high-level guest request. The reason sounded plausible on paper, but to Anne it felt like a deliberate confession. "No filming or photography allowed," she muttered. This level of concealment only strengthened her suspicion. This was not a technical fault. It was an order from above. Without electronic devices, all information remained sealed. Not a single photo could leak. She pressed on. Anne began verifying the identities of the unfamiliar temporary staff appearing in perimeter footage. She contacted Royal Security to check temporary personnel files. After 2 days, one name stood out, a young woman named Sarah, who had previously worked high-end London events. Anne arranged a private meeting with Sarah at a small cafe in Aberdeen, away from prying eyes. The meeting took place on a drizzly afternoon. Sarah sat opposite, hands trembling around her teacup. Anne spoke directly. "I know you were hired to serve at Balmoral during the recent parties. I want the truth. Who hired you? What happened there?" Sarah bowed her head, voice small but clear. "Your Royal Highness, I was contacted by Laura Lopes through an agency. They paid double the usual rate but demanded absolute secrecy. The guests were wealthy people, art investors. We had to turn off cameras when requested, and everyone had to surrender phones into a box before entering the hall. No photos or recordings allowed. They said it was royal protocol to protect privacy." Anne listened carefully, taking precise notes. Sarah's statement perfectly matched the perimeter camera footage and the internal system gaps. She asked one more question. "Did you ever see Queen Camilla there?" Sarah shook her head. "Never, ma'am. Only Ms. Laura and her team. But everything was arranged as though it were an official royal event." Anne left the cafe feeling both satisfied and burdened. She now had a key piece, direct testimony from an insider. Back at Balmoral, she compiled everything, registrations under Camilla's name, Laura's car on camera, internal camera blackouts, and Sarah's statement. All pieces fit together with irrefutable logic. This was not an accident or oversight. It was an organized misuse of the royal name to create false prestige and attract investment for Laura's personal project. Anne sat alone in her room, watching the garden darken. Duty weighed heavily. She must protect the heritage before things went too far. She knew the next step would be far more difficult, a confrontation with Camilla and Laura. But Anne did not hesitate. She picked up the phone and called Michael. "Prepare the complete file. We are finishing the evidence-gathering phase. The time for action is coming." Her voice was calm, yet carried the pressure of someone who had decided there would be no compromise. The real storm was about to break. Laura Lopes was in her Mayfair Gallery office in London when her phone vibrated. A short message from the Royal System Manager, the one her mother had asked for help. "They're checking more closely. Perimeter cameras show signs of being accessed again. Be careful." Laura's heart pounded. She knew immediately. Princess Anne had started moving. In recent days, she had noticed small but alarming changes. Some temporary staff were questioned. Several old servants suddenly went silent. And most importantly, the Balmoral registration system began requiring two-factor authentication that hadn't existed before. Laura panicked but tried to stay composed. She immediately called Camilla on their private line, voice trembling despite her efforts. "Mum, Anne is digging into everything. They even approached Sarah, the server I hired last time. We have to stop right now." On the other end, Camilla was silent for a long time. When she spoke, her voice retained its familiar authority, but carried clear remorse. "Calm down, Laura. I'll handle it. This was for your future. But if it has come to this, we must erase every trace. Leave nothing that can directly link back." Laura did not wait. She acted urgently. First, the system. She contacted the manager her mother had relied on and ordered him to delete all data related to the parties over the past 6 months. "Delete the registration history, delete approval notes, and wipe access logs," she said over the phone, voice hurried. The man hesitated. "Miss, this is very risky. If it's discovered..." Laura cut him off. "Do it. My mother will take responsibility." Within hours, the electronic records vanished, at least on the surface. The history under Camilla's name disappeared, replaced by vague system technical errors. Next came the people. Laura called the roughly 20 outsourced servers who had worked the largest parties. She informed them briefly, "Contracts terminated immediately. You will receive a final bonus, but you must not speak to anyone. If asked, say you only worked normal contracts." She cut all contact with the agency, deleted phone numbers and emails, and even asked them to change SIM cards to avoid tracing. Some accepted silence for the generous payout, but Sarah, the one who had met Anne, could no longer be reached. Laura knew that was a major risk. Finally, Laura opened her personal safe in the office, took out printed files, and burned them. On her computer, she deleted the Balmoral Events folder, ran permanent data wipe software, then formatted backup drives. She even instructed her private lawyer to prepare a statement if needed. All were private events, unrelated to the royal family. But no matter how hard she tried, Laura still felt uneasy. She knew she could not erase everything. The perimeter camera footage, showing her car, still existed in royal security archives. Sarah's testimony, if pressured, would be living evidence, and most importantly, Camilla. Her mother could cover some parts, but not all. Laura sank into the sofa, hands covering her face. She had once thought everything was under control, the gallery about to expand, investors rushing in, reputation growing stronger. Now it all risked collapse simply because of one resolute woman, Princess Anne. Princess Anne sat in a private meeting room at Clarence House. Afternoon light filtered through heavy curtains, casting long stripes across the oak table. Before her lay the final dossier. Every piece had fallen into place, forming an undeniable picture. Queen Camilla had quietly used her authority to register Balmoral for private events, enabling Laura Lopes to host lavish parties that exploited the royal name to build false prestige for her personal art gallery project. Anne felt deep sadness mixed with anger. She did not hate Camilla. She only regretted that a woman who had endured so much had let maternal love cloud her judgment. But above all, she grieved for the royal heritage being misused. Balmoral was not private property to be used for business. It was a symbol of continuity, of responsibility toward history and the public. Anne took a deep breath, then signaled to Assistant Michael. "Call an emergency internal meeting, only essential people. I will chair." The meeting took place that evening. The atmosphere was heavy, like a silent trial. Camilla sat on one side of the table, face calm but eyes showing clear exhaustion. Laura was not present, and Anne had decided against direct confrontation to avoid unnecessary escalation. Anne opened. "Sister Camilla, I have gathered sufficient evidence. Balmoral has been used for improper purposes for many months. Registrations under your name, but in reality, to allow Laura to host parties, attracting investment. Cameras turned off, staff replaced, guests required to surrender phones, all to conceal the true nature. These were not royal events. This was an abuse of authority to create false credibility and deceive investors." Camilla remained silent for a long time, then sighed. "Anne, I won't deny it. I only wanted to help Laura. She has worked so hard, and I thought, as long as it didn't become public, no one would be harmed." Her voice grew quieter, remorse evident. Anne looked straight into her sister-in-law's eyes. "No one harmed. When the royal name is used to mislead investors, when tradition is turned into a business tool, the entire family suffers. Mother spent her life protecting these values. You know that better than anyone." There was no heated argument. Camilla bowed her head, accepting the truth. Anne presented the action plan. The matter would be handled internally, kept from the public to avoid a major scandal. But there must be clear consequences. The registration and usage system for royal properties would be much more tightly controlled. From now on, every booking required dual independent approval. Internal cameras could not be disabled except in emergencies, and temporary staff lists must be vetted in advance. Camilla's access to the estate management system would be restricted for at least 2 years, and any decision involving Balmoral or other residences must be approved by Anne or a small committee. Though not present, Laura faced direct consequences. When investors indirectly learned that Balmoral had been used improperly, trust collapsed rapidly. Many withdrew funding. The Lopes Gallery project plunged into severe financial crisis. Laura faced potential lawsuits from some investors who felt deceived, not yet criminal, but enough to destroy the reputation and career she had built. She received an official royal notice. She was barred from using any royal property under the family name, and all involvement in internal royal events was terminated. Anne closed the meeting with a brief statement. Our royal family must stand on tradition and transparency. No exceptions, not for family ties or any other reason. From now on, every loophole will be closed. She stood up, looking around the table. No one objected. Camilla left in silence, shoulders slightly slumped. Anne remained alone, gazing out at the dark London night. She felt tired, but also relieved. She had done what needed to be done, not to punish, but to protect. In the weeks that followed, Anne personally oversaw the overhaul of procedures. A new, more transparent and stricter system was implemented. Balmoral returned to its traditional rhythm. Events occurred only on official schedules, familiar staff returned, and mysterious gaps vanished. The matter was closed internally, with not a single line reaching the press exactly as Anne intended. But the lesson remained, deeply etched in the minds of those who witnessed it. The royal family is not immune to temptation from within. Only when someone as resolute as Anne steps forward can the heritage be safeguarded. She sought no praise, no recognition. For Anne, restoring transparency and discipline was the greatest reward. And Balmoral, once again, stood as a solid symbol of tradition, no longer exploited, but preserved as it always should have been. In your opinion, was Laura Lopes's action driven by personal ambition, or was it a consequence of the privileged environment in which she grew up? Share your thoughts with us in the comment section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy.